Welcome back to In with Denoux.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome into In with Denoux featuring Jordan Shannon. We are doing a special episode that's going to be releasing on Friday. So as you're watching this, it is Friday. And it is technically, I think there's some games Friday night, but the real start of the college football season is tomorrow. And so we wanted to jump on and do a special preview. So just to let you know what we're going to be talking about, we're going to start just by previewing week one, and we're going to talk about the 4 big games, really 3 big games, and then we're going to throw a 4th one in there just because it has a little bit of juice to it. And then we're going to jump into big games the rest of the season. So there's about 10 or 12 games that Jordan and I picked out, and we'll run through those and kind of talk through storylines, what it could mean for the playoff, all those types of things. And then we'll end the video talking about mainly SEC stuff. So we're going to talk about how, starting next year, we're going to a 9-game SEC schedule instead of an 8-game SEC schedule, what that means, whether Jordan and I agree with it, what we think is good, what we think is bad. And then also what's going to be a part of that change is that every team in the SEC will have 3 permanent opponents that they play every single season. And so those haven't been released yet. And so we'll talk about for the different teams, we're going to probably focus a little bit more on LSU and Florida just because those are our favorite teams. But we'll kind of talk about games that we hope kind of stay permanent every year, some of the rivalries that do exist in the SEC. So that's kind of a rundown of how we're going to do it. So those of you that are college football fans, thank you for joining us. It's kind of something we wanted to throw out on a different day instead of Monday because it is different. It's something that is kind of its own entity that doesn't really fit really with the rest of the podcast. It's kind of something fun we just wanted to do. So as we jump into week 1, the first game that we want to discuss, the biggest one on the docket for week 1 is Texas at Ohio State. And so I'll pass it over to you, Jordan. What are your thoughts going into this game? What are you excited to watch? And who do you think will win?
Man, it is always fun when you get a top 3 matchup in the first week. It feels like Christmas coming early. So to get Texas going into Columbus and Ohio Stadium to face off against the defending national champion at Ohio State, that's gonna be fun.
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to it. It's interesting because both teams are breaking in new quarterbacks. Like Julian Sayin is the new signal call. He was originally committed to Bama under Saban, and then went to Ohio State and now has a starting spot up there. And then you got the heir to the Manning legacy in Arch, right, at Texas. Yeah. And honestly, man, it feels like it's a toss-up. You would think home field advantage would give that way to Ohio State, especially with having Jeremiah Smith on the outside and having just guys like Jeremiah Smith can go into the league right now, right? He's already that good. And then you have Brandon Ennis, another receiver who's just under the radar. And on the defensive side, you have Caleb Downs, another Alabama guy who, in my opinion, is the best coverage safety in all of college football.
Absolutely.
Probably the best defensive player. So Ohio State as a team is stacked. But then you also got to face against Texas, who they were, they in their first year in the SEC made it to the SEC championship.
Right.
I think, man, given an Arch with Sarkisian, like Steve Sarkisian, the head coach, I think is a really good match. I think that him being able to practice and learn that system gives him the edge, especially over Sayin. So I got Texas pulling off an upset in Ohio Stadium.
Okay.
I have them really going in there and delivering something that we just have not seen. And that's kind of crazy, but I just feel like Sark got the boys ready. And Texas, I think Sark is under much more pressure than Ryan Day, the coaches. He has to win. He has Texas influence, Texas money behind him. He has a bunch of support, and I think they're just ready. If they go to the playoff this year, this will be their 3rd year in the playoff, I believe, consecutively.
Yeah.
So it's kind of similar to what we saw with Harbaugh at Michigan. I think Texas now is probably the most complete team. So I think they show it this weekend.
Okay. Wow. Okay. That's that game is wild, right? It's one of those games where your prediction could sway day to day because these teams are probably the 2 most talented teams on paper in the country, right? And year in and year out, that's how it usually is, but especially with NIL, like that's probably how it's going to be with schools like Ohio State and Texas, who have funding
Whoever got that
and
money.
yeah, have money and they already have history too. Like both those programs were really good programs prior to NIL, so they kind of have both of those things working for them. But this game's really interesting, man. I think if it was on a neutral site, I would lean towards your prediction. I do think with it being in Ohio State, it does lean a little bit to Ohio State's favor, and I think that's the only reason they're favored, right? Like they're technically, an underdog on paper in terms of being ranked lower, but I think because they're at home is the only reason they're ranked, right? But it does kind of even things out that both quarterbacks are making their first start. So because of that, though, I think is a little bit more of a reason to lean Ohio State. And Arch does have a little bit more experience where he did get in some games. He did start some lower level games when Quinn Ewers was hurt. So he does have that edge to it a bit. But like you said, the weapons that Ohio State has, I do think helps a young quarterback, that could throw some short slants, could throw some screens. And even you have a guy like Jeremiah Smith who you could throw it up and he could come down with those 50-50 balls. And I do wonder how Arch will do with someone like a Caleb Downs roaming, is he going to be able to bait him into some bad throws, things like that. Because both of these quarterbacks, but especially Arch, I feel like is going to have a little bit of pressure to deliver immediately. Arch, like I can't think of a player that had more hype going into their first big time start ever, Like I really can't think of another player that had that type of
Probably
hype.
Tebow or Manziel.
Yeah,
Maybe
Tebow.
one
I
of
think
those
like
two, but not
Leonard,
even not
like
even
Leonard Fournette, but he's a running back. Like there was just when everything's on your shoulders, and like you said, like they're starting to build up some pressure for Sark to win. They made the playoffs. They've done well, but they haven't taken it all the way, right? So I would lean Ohio State, but I think it's going to be close. I think it'll be back and forth. I think like a special teams play could decide it. A turnover late could decide it. But I think whichever quarterback is able to take that pressure and not overextend themselves, like not try to do something outside of their game, not try to fit a ball in when they shouldn't. I think the quarterback that tries to do that and there's a pick by Caleb Downs, or something like that, then that could decide the game. And so, again, I think if it was neutral site or if it was at Texas, I think I might go Texas. But I do think it will be Ohio State, but close in that game. And it's interesting. It's kind of cool you mentioned Brandon Ennis, who plays for Ohio State. So I actually saw Brandon Ennis play in high school. So he went to American Heritage in Fort Lauderdale. And when I was living down in Broward, I went to a American Heritage football game. And he was their number one receiver, and they also had Mark Fletcher, who's the starting running back for University of Miami, and they were on the same team. And it was just unfair, especially Mark Fletcher.
Unreal.
Yeah, the game that I saw them play, they were playing against a team that had no business being on the same field as them. But American Heritage starting quarterback was out, got hurt the week before and was out for the season. So they had a freshman who was tiny playing quarterback. So the game was actually close going into half. But in my mind, I'm like, I'm seeing this guy, Mark Fletcher, in the backfield, and this dude looks like an absolute giant compared to everybody else on the field. And I'm like, why are they not handing the ball off to this guy every single play? In the second half, literally that's what they did. And he must have run for like 150 yards and like 2 or 3 touchdowns. In the second half, he was just running over people. But yeah, Brandon Ennis was the number one receiver, and I think Mark Fletcher was like the number 2 or 3 running back, and they were both committed to Ohio State, and then Mark Fletcher decommitted and went to like kind of last minute. So, but yeah, Brandon Ennis is kind of a up and comer. He hasn't really like stamped his name into college football circles yet, but he's a really good player. So okay, so
Yeah.
you're going
and this
Texas.
could be the game where he does it, honestly. This
Yeah,
could be the
yeah.
game where because I have a feeling Texas will try to scheme for Jeremiah Smith, and I'm
Yep,
sure they
yep.
have Brandon Ennis on their radar, but with trying to cover Smith, you're gonna probably overcompensate, and that gives Ennis so many opportunities to just make a name.
That's true.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be it's a treat. Like these are two
Yeah.
teams that we could very much see in the national title, right?
Absolutely.
Like these are teams that we could see at the end of the whole thing, playing in the national championship.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Which is super cool. Like I feel like the last couple years we're seeing more games like this early. And as an LSU fan, we'll talk about that game here in a minute. I think LSU is kind of known for scheduling big games like this early. So I'm kind of used to it, but I'm not used to seeing this many in week 1. These big games that could be playoff teams or playoff matchups, or like you said, national championship previews, which is crazy. So, okay, so you're going Texas. I'm going Ohio State. I think we both think it's going to be close, back and forth. I don't see a blowout either way. I think both teams are too talented to get blown out. But I think it would be like a 3-point game, a 4-point game, a 1-score game. And I do think the home field advantage does play a bit of a factor in a quarterback that's making his first big time start, and then Arch Manning. So, okay. So the next biggest game, and we kind of did these in order of importance, or, what is going to be looked at as the biggest games of the weekend. LSU at Clemson. This one is obviously big for me as an LSU fan. But there's a lot of juice to this game. There are also two teams that are, have a lot of expectations inwardly and, around the country. So I'll let you go first as I try to lower my bias before I go.
Man, LSU Clemson. And this game's at night, right? Is this game at night? I'm pretty sure.
7 p.m.
Yeah, man. Clemson at night is underrated. Like, obviously, we talk about, like, in terms of home field advantages, and LSU is usually at the top, right? But there's something about, like, Clemson playing early in the season at night at home that just feels like, yes, this is college football. And so for them to be playing host to LSU, again, another playoff semifinal matchup, or just playoff matchup, or potential, like, I mean, this was the national title from 5 years ago with Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence.
That's right.
So it just has history. It's going to be a lot of fun, but I never know what I'm going to get out of Clemson.
Yeah, it's true.
And
it's
so
true.
like with Cade Klubnik and that, like, he's a great quarterback, and like defensively, usually Dabo has his guys like ready and stacked, especially on the defensive line. But I'm obviously more familiar with LSU just from our connections, but there's something about, like, you get a sense that this is obviously a make or break year for Brian Kelly too. I don't foresee a blowout in this one, kind of similar to Ohio State, Texas, but I think I could see LSU doing something that is crazy, which is, giving Clemson a fight for their life, making things real crazy for them. I could actually see LSU winning by 2 touchdowns in this.
Wow.
Primarily because, like, I think Aaron Anderson is someone that no one really is talking about, right, as a receiver. I think Harold Perkins I think they're going to use him in ways on the defensive side that is actually going to be really impressive, right? And Garrett Nussmeier is very underrated. I know like the Netflix show came out with the Weeks brothers, like the Witt. They're really strong linebackers. Like, I'm more familiar with LSU, so I get a sense that I could see them going into Death Valley and claiming rights to Death Valley. This almost feels like the battle for Death Valley in that way. So give me LSU to take this one, to take the victory over Clemson. I think I'll even say, like, I think they make it very convincing.
Wow.
Just because I don't know what I'm gonna get out of Clemson and Cade Klubnik. Like, they seem like a team that can go down. I'm just remembering that Texas game last year when they played in the playoff, and they did march a comeback, but Texas dominated for most of that game. And so I foresee that that's the last image I have of them, and I just think they could easily let this game get out of hand.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, you have more confidence in my Tigers than I do. So, okay, so I will say earlier in the summer, I felt very confident Clemson would just win this game outright. And not to say like I didn't think LSU could win, but I was like, I just don't think LSU is going to be able to win this game. And the main reason I thought that was, so LSU is replacing 4 of 5 offensive linemen starters. And the one offensive lineman that's returning, he's moving to another position on the line. So they technically don't have any starters back in the position they played prior. Now, that being said, they have a ton of talent on the offensive line, a ton of talent. And, obviously I'm a lot more tuned into LSU than any other team. So I know them a lot more than Clemson, but obviously any other game that we're going to talk about today outside of other LSU games. But the reports coming out of camp and all this stuff was that when the offensive linemen were doing one-on-one drills against defensive linemen, they looked great. But as a unit, they just haven't put it together yet. And that's been like up till recently. Like they're still trying to figure out who's going to play right tackle. Like they have like left tackle and center, or I'm sorry, right guard. So the outsides and the middle are set, but the guards are not set. And so I really think that this game could come down to that right there. And it's because Clemson, everybody, and this is kind of interesting, and this is, I'll tell you why I'm starting to gain a little bit more confidence in LSU, is that people are raving about Clemson's defensive line, right? Like they could have the best defensive line in the country. They have a guy named Peter Woods, who's an interior lineman who, is going to be a top 5, top 10. And then they have an edge player too, whose name is escaping me right now. But these two guys have been talked about all summer long when this game comes up. And they're like, they could wreak havoc, with LSU's new offensive line group. And looking at the stats, like Peter Woods is the main one, and he is really good. But when I looked back at Clemson and like listened to some commentary on people talking about this game, is that Clemson was horrible against the run last year. They were like 107th in the nation against the run last year. And so it seems like maybe those guys are good pass rushers, but maybe not good against the run. So I'm really curious to see how that goes. But the other thing is that LSU was horrible at running the ball last year, which is crazy for an LSU team. I think they were 109th or something in rushing in the nation, but they were also 126th in attempts. So a lot of people are like, were they bad at running the ball, or did they just give up on it too quickly?
They didn't do it. Yeah.
Right. And so I think that will be interesting. They have an elite back in Caden Durham, and so I think that they have the back to do it. I think it's, can they block that front seven of Clemson? And I think that if Nussmeier has time, to your point about the receivers, LSU has a litany of receivers, and the thing is, they're not the names like Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson or Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas. They're not those names, but it's the deepest wide receiver group that they've had in a really long time, like maybe since 2019 on the championship year. But they have Varian Brown, who transferred in from Kentucky. And the thing is that
the burner.
They're all speedsters. That's the other thing, is that LSU, they haven't had this many speedsters in a long time. So they have Varian Brown. They have Xavier Thomas, who came from Mississippi State a couple years ago. So those two guys, not only are they good receivers, and Xavier Thomas is kind of a gadget guy. He gets moved around. He's in the backfield. But they both led the SEC in kick returns the last 2 seasons. So Xavier Thomas at Mississippi State 2 years ago led the nation.
And I think Varian has the record for kick return TDs in SEC.
Exactly.
Kentucky.
So that's the other thing where I'm kind of gaining a little confidence in LSU, is that, so from what I'm hearing, Varian Brown's going to be the kick returner and Xavier Thomas is going to be the punt returner. And that's what they're like the best at. So I think that could turn this game, a kickoff return for a touchdown, or giving LSU really good field position beyond the 50, something like that. But the thing I will say is these two teams, I think, are very even, like very, very even. Because if you look, a lot of people, they do position breakdowns, right? Where it's like offensive line versus offensive line. That goes to Clemson. Linebackers versus linebackers, that goes to LSU. Receivers goes to LSU. DBs goes to LSU. Quarterback is a wash. Running back goes to LSU. I think corners go to Clemson as of right now, just because LSU's are a little bit of an unknown, but safety group goes to LSU. So, like, it's actually pretty even when you start breaking down position by position. And so, man, I think this game's going to be close. I do think if there's a blowout, that it would more likely be LSU than Clemson, and maybe that's a little bit of bias, but I think it's because of the special team stuff that could maybe break the game open. And I do think there's some X factors, right? Like you said, Harold Perkins didn't play much last year. He had a ACL tear that ended his season. He's back there saying he looks unbelievable, and they're using him more how they used him. His freshman year, he was like an All-American. And then they kind of tried to move him to a different position, and it just didn't work out. And then he got hurt last year. So they've moved him back to the star role, which is kind of that slot position. And then he'll be coming off the edge a lot too. Whit Weeks in the middle is just a game wrecker. He's that guy that will get 15, 20 tackles. He's just all over the field. And I do think that there's a bit of, playing for Kyron Lacey, who passed away, during the offseason and didn't get drafted. I think there's a lot of that. Garrett Nussmeier getting the number 18, which is huge for LSU. It gets voted on by past 18 wearers. So I think, he's taking a lot of pride in that. So yeah, I think biasly, I'm going to pick LSU. But I think it's going to be closer than people think. I think that both defenses, I think LSU's defense is going to be better than a lot of people anticipate it being. I think Clemson's defense has already proved to be pretty good, but we'll see against the run. And so I think I could see a game that's like 27-21, 27-24, when a lot of people I think might think it's going to be a high scoring game because of the quarterbacks, the experience, all that stuff. So I'll pick LSU. I think it's going to be close. And like Jordan said, it's kind of the battle for the Death Valleys. Both teams call their stadium Death Valley. And that's kind of been another thing this offseason with Brian Kelly saying, he said Little Death Valley. He called theirs Little Death Valley. So we'll see how it goes, but I will go with LSU. I will go with LSU, but I am not super confident in my pick. But I will say this is that if LSU loses, I'm still confident in their season. Like, I think that if they lose, I do think it will be because the offensive line just can't hold up. But I think that offensive line 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now is just going to keep getting better and better as they get reps under their belt in real games. So I think it will be close, but I think LSU will pull it out. And I think special teams could be the reason why. So, okay, so we both got LSU there. The next game, which I think is this is a kind of a game that's flying under the radar a bit, is Notre Dame at Miami. You got the Catholics versus convicts, what they used to call it back in the 80s and 90s. So I think there's even an ESPN 30 for 30 called Catholics versus Convicts.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, how are you feeling about this game?
Man, it's weird because, I hate Miami. But, Notre Dame is something, they used to be the butt of the joke for the last, 10 years, right? Like, we would always see them, playing an independent schedule, and they would play, these mid-tier D1 teams, and then they would just ease their way to a national championship berth where they would get blown out by an Alabama or a Clemson or something, right? But I feel like in the last 5 years, we've actually witnessed Notre Dame be like, no, we play legit football, right? Like we actually can compete with anyone. I think about what they did. Like they lost many of the games I'm going to mention. They lost, but remember they went down and played Georgia in 2019, but they played them into a 1-score game in Georgia. They went and played what's the name of that squad? They played Clemson. They hosted Clemson in 2020, and Clemson was ranked number 1, and they beat Clemson. And I remember just thinking, Notre Dame, we need to start respecting them more. And then just look at last year. They beat Georgia and they beat Penn State and, made it all the way to the national championship game. So I think Notre Dame, they'll be breaking in a new quarterback because Riley Leonard is no longer the quarterback there. But I'm not. Miami's home field. I feel like Miami doesn't really have home field advantage. They struggle to sell out their stadiums. So I like Notre Dame going in there and just kind of taking it from them. I think Carson Beck, I think he's okay. I don't think he's a great quarterback. I don't think he is a terrible quarterback, but I think just trying to get more chemistry. He's not like Cam Ward, who had a really good year in the Pac-12 and then went to Miami. He had a pretty rough year at Georgia last year before getting injured, and Georgia still did good things without him, but it's just I'm not convinced that he is going to give them more of a chance at national championship possibilities than Cam Ward. So give me Notre Dame to go in there and to just and to beat them. And it's kind of similar to how I feel about LSU Clemson, to beat them pretty definitively. I think Jeremiah Love is going to have a fun time running the ball down there.
So you and I are more on the same page in terms of even how the game looks for this one. I could see it being close, and the only reason I say I could see it being close is that I do think Carson Beck will be better than he was last year, but I think he'll be kind of in between where he was when he was vying for national championships and where he was last year. I think maybe a fresh start will be good for him in a new system. To be honest, I'm not even 100% sure of what Miami's weapons are looking like, but I do know that Georgia, for as good as they've been over the last 10 years, 8 years, they haven't had a ton of big time weapons like receivers. They obviously had Brock Bowers, but he's the only pass
George
catcher.
Pickens.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
they were like good, but not like elite. You know what I mean? So I don't know what Miami's weapons are really looking like, but I do think a fresh start will be good for Carson Beck. But I do think that Notre Dame ultimately will win convincingly by 2 scores. And the reason I say that is you kind of alluded to this, but like you were talking about Notre Dame kind of being the butt of the joke over the last several years because of their scheduling. But I think, and I'm not saying, because obviously Brian Kelly is with LSU now, and I'm not saying they were like soft under Brian Kelly or anything like that, but I do think that Marcus Freeman has brought this hard nose where they're not soft. They're not a soft team,
Yeah.
and they can play with the big boys. I mean, we'll see if they can play with the biggest of the big boys, down the road. And they did, make it to the national championship game last year and weren't able to finish it off, but they beat Georgia, in the playoffs last year. And I know Georgia wasn't as impressive as they had been in past years, but that's still if you beat Georgia in a playoff setting, that's a big time victory and not something that comes
Right.
easy, especially because Georgia was still Georgia in the trenches, in that front seven of their defense. So I do think Notre Dame, and again, like you said, with Love running the ball, I do think they'll be able to wear Miami down. And like you said, I don't think home field advantage is really that big of a thing in Miami. Having grown up in South Florida, I know that to be true, is that, there's a lot of fans, but they just don't get out to the game. I think it's kind of a travesty that they don't have their own stadium. I think that would create,
Yeah.
and I know if you know Miami and know where the school is, it is in a spot that's hard to have a stadium down there. But man, if they had a stadium on campus, I think that would change a lot in terms of maybe not like a Florida or an LSU or an Ohio State type of home field advantage, but I do think it would give them a little bit more of an advantage that they have now in recruiting as well, to have that atmosphere and something to call their own. But I'm with you. I think Notre
Honestly,
Dame
they're missing the
takes that.
Orange Bowl of old.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're missing. I just feel like they're missing the old Orange Bowl.
Yep.
Honestly,
Yep.
I heard stories of that. Like I've never been to it, but I've like obviously seen pictures and watched games that were based there. And when Miami had their Orange Bowl, like man, that was different. Like that actually was home field advantage, and it just feels bad. I feel bad like that they don't have that anymore because honestly, I think that does take some of the energy and the excitement and the tradition away from the program. And you actually hear like some of the former players talk that way about it
Yeah.
too.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. I totally agree. And even that wasn't even on campus, right? But it was something they could call their own, at least, and it was theirs. So, which I think does create a little bit more mystique, a little bit more aura for your team, is something to call their own, a little bit more pride. And like, I do think maybe it's a psychological thing, but a lot of athletes, like, they need that little psychological edge, right? Of like, this is our home, like, this is our stadium. Let's protect it. Let's
Yeah,
fight
especially
for it.
football.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I think there is something to that. You hear about Florida players like, about the swamp, like the aura of the swamp, Clemson and LSU talking about Death Valley or Tiger Stadium. And having honestly, it takes away from these traditions too, right? Like LSU has Tiger Walk, where they come down the whole street down their stadium. They all wear suits. There's like thousands, and I'm not even saying this as like a dig, but like Florida has something like that, but it's like the little sidewalk. So LSU's would be like walking all the way down University, like in comparison, like basically if Florida walked down University from like, maybe not all the way from like 34th, but it was so like there'd be thousands and thousands of fans, like a parade almost kind of
Yeah,
thing. So you have that, Clemson has their little hill they run down and they touch the rock or whatever.
yeah, Howard Rock. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And so there's just not that. There's not something can put in there because it's not theirs. Even with LSU, when they're running out of the locker room, they have the win bar. So they have like a little bar that says win, and they all like hit it as they go out. These little things that are just, I don't know, you build up, like LSU literally builds like hype videos around that win bar, that starts with them hitting
yeah,
that win bar. You just don't have that. And I know Miami, they have swag, they can make hype videos, but I don't know. I think that is a psychological thing of having your own stadium and something to protect. So okay, so we both have Notre Dame there. And I think defensively, I think between their defense and their run game, they kind of grind that game out and could blow it open
yeah,
late. And then the last game, we
yeah. I
won't.
think
Sorry, go ahead.
they squeeze Miami. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was gonna
I
say I
agree.
just think I think they squeeze Miami. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. And I think, and I hope to see this because I kind of want, outside of the LSU game because of bias, like I want LSU just to blow that game open. But when there's big games like this, like I want it to be close. Like I want it to come down to the wire. So I really hope Carson Beck has a resurgence and he really does make that a game. But I think week 1, that might be tough against Notre Dame. Okay, so last game of week 1 we'll talk about, and we won't spend too much time on this because I think this one will be an absolute blowout. But the only reason I wanted to throw it in here was really just the comments made prior to this game and just coming off maybe the worst season ever in their history is Alabama at Florida State. And so I think this will be a blowout, but I'm kind of curious just to see if Alabama just puts their foot on the gas and makes it even worse than I think it's going to be because of the comments made by Tommy I can't even remember how to pronounce it.
Yeah, Tommy Castanello. Yeah.
So I don't even know if you saw those comments, that he made towards Alabama or whatever. But Alabama
did he make?
Certainly,
No, I didn't. Now you got me curious.
Yeah. So let me look up the actual quote just so I don't. Yeah, he's okay. So he says they don't have Nick Saban to save them. I just don't see them stopping me. And then he went on to say because he came from Boston College, and he basically was saying like, now I have a team around me. I was putting everything on my own shoulders, in years prior. So he's like, now I have a squad around me, kind of taking shots at his old team and kind of just bulletin board material for Alabama. So literally that's the only reason I wanted to put this game on there, is that I just want to see how bad that he's going to have to eat crow, because they're not winning that game.
Yeah. And Castanella's is a little guy. Like, I mean, if we love the word, we love the Bible on this podcast. So it's like a true David and Goliath situation. But honestly, like this isn't a David and Goliath story. This is just a really What's funny is Castanella's transfer to Florida State, a team that he beat while he was at Boston College last year.
Yeah. Yep.
A team that won 2 games last year. And now you think you're going to come in and lead them against Alabama, who was a fringe playoff team last year. Like who is also like, they're having a new quarterback star like Ty Simpkins, but they have Ryan Williams and they still have Jam Miller. They still got
their
Jeremy
defense
Bernard.
Is real good.
Their defense is stat. Like, I'm like, I'm sorry, but if maybe he might know something I don't, but I just don't see it. I see Bama going in, and this game will be probably even uglier than you and I can imagine.
Yeah, I think because of those comments, and it's crazy because he actually lost his starting job at Boston College by the end of last year. So his former coach at Boston College even came out and responded to these comments he made, and he was like, yeah, he's a liar. Like he was just like kind of bashing his character and stuff. So that's literally the only reason I put this down there, is because I was like, when I saw those comments, I was like, wow, this man. I was like,
and me, I'll always be happy to see Florida State lose. So
yeah,
sign me up.
Yeah, so he I think he put his teammates in a rough position for week 1. But I mean, hey, I guess crazier things have happened. I don't think Florida State could be as bad as they were last year. So I think they'll be around 500, but I don't see them competing in this game at all.
And honestly, this is probably the only time I try to defend Florida State in any way, but we didn't think Vandy would beat Bama last year.
Right. That's true. That's true.
And so that's the beautiful thing about this sport, man. Like, things can happen that's crazy. It's very, I mean, I didn't think Georgia would lose to Notre Dame last year, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, there's no way Notre Dame's beating Georgia. So strange things can happen in the sport, but I'm not on the train of like thinking that every underdog is going to win. That's hard for me to get behind. Particularly in this scenario, like, I'm like, Florida State, you're just coming off a 2-win season and you're breaking in a new quarterback and you're playing host to Alabama. I don't see it.
I just don't see it. Yeah, and to be honest, like, what's crazy is that there's actually some truth to what he's saying. The way he worded it was horribly. And he was not the one that needed to say that comment at all. But like, you've already seen that Bama's different without Nick Saban, but they're still a very, very, very good team. So to say that,
right.
I don't think he should have brought up Nick Saban at all, but like, there's some truth to what he's saying in the sense that they're not the same Bama as they've been, but they're still Bama. Totally. You know what I mean? They're still a very, very top top tier team for sure. So, okay, so those are the four kind of, or really three, and then we threw that last one in there. Big games of week one. And so I don't think it's really worth going into the rest of week one. But what we'll do now is we'll walk through some big games for the rest of the season. And I have them written down here. And Jordan, if you have some that I don't have, you could throw them out. And we won't spend as much time on these as we did week one. We kind of wanted to preview week one just because it starts this weekend. And when you're watching this, it will start tomorrow. And so we'll just walk through and we'll kind of maybe just talk about some implications. We'll maybe quickly throw out it's kind of hard to even know sometimes who's going to win these games because by the time they're happening, everything's changed, right? A quarterback gets hurt. A team's way better than we thought or not as good as we thought. So maybe we'll just kind of throw out some implications, some thoughts on the matchup. And so I have the weeks written down on mine. So I'm going to throw them out in order of when they come. So the earliest one I have is week 3, which is Florida at LSU. So I guess that's one that's nice to jump into first because those are our teams. But what are you thinking about this game?
So appropriately named, right? Segue right into that. Yeah. Oh, man, this is a fun one, man. This is always a fun game. Probably of all the games on a schedule, probably the one that causes me the most stress, honestly. Just because of how close it is, and yet it obviously has gone more LSU's way than Florida's way in the last decade.
Yeah.
But the games have always most of the games in the last decade have been
close,
one possession game.
Yeah.
And this is where I'm can we just get the Tigers off our back? And so I think it's interesting that this game is being played in September. I personally don't like that.
Me neither.
Generally we get y'all in October.
Second weekend of October.
Yeah, and we get a sense of how each other is. We're both the SEC opener for each other, and I think that's it's a little bit scary. LSU will have been tested more. They will have played competition at the same level or better than Florida. Florida's going to be coming off of playing South Florida and Long Island. So I typically like those types of games for a team to get some confidence under them, especially before late like this. This starts what I think is probably the hardest slate in college football history in terms of the 4-game stretch, because we got y'all, and then we got to travel to Miami, and then we get a bye week, and then we'll talk about the next ones soon. Just because I don't want to spoil them, but it's just I just this 4-game stretch is going to decide our season, in my opinion. We'll know if Florida is a playoff team just off of this 4-game stretch. I will say, I think in that 4 games, Florida, I'm aiming for them to be 2-2, 3-1. If they're 3-1, that means they have to either steal, obviously, they have to drop an LSU or Texas or A&M, right? And given just it's a night game at LSU, that is not boded well for the Gators. That's the only team I think of that can actually do that has been Bama. Right? Bama's the only team that I can think of that has bested LSU at night at home
consistently.
But you know what? Crazy things happen. Give me my Gators to pull off a narrow upset. I think this is going to be again a tight game. I think this is a 3-point, something like Garrett Nussmeier maybe fumbles at the wrong time or takes a sack in a bad position at the wrong time. But give me the Gators to pull off a crazy upset in Baton Rouge. Just kind of saying, hello, we are trying to make a playoff run ourselves.
And
I had to give you the Clemson game so that I could set up for this game. That basically is what I'm doing.
I guess I'll be more bullish on this game. No, funny enough though, I actually do think the Clemson games plays a big role in how this game goes. And what I mean by that, and honestly, it's weirdly either way. I think that in the past few seasons, because LSU hasn't won a season opener in 5 since they won the national championship, which is crazy. And 2 of those were under Orgeron, and the last 3 have been under Brian Kelly. But I think that because of that, they've put so much emphasis on Clemson. All they're talking about is Clemson. They literally, on their punching bags in the gym, they put those Clemson tiger paws on them. They're focusing all on Clemson. And I think if they lose that game, like to put so much effort and energy and thought into that game. I could see it going one way or the other. In the past, like the last few years, they've kind of used it as motivation to still have pretty good seasons even after dropping the opener. Now, granted, they haven't been great, but like year one, they lost to Florida State under Brian Kelly. I mean, they lost to Florida State, but then they ended up winning the SEC West, right, and playing Georgia in the SEC championship. And then Jaden Daniels, wins the Heisman after losing to Florida State again in week one. And then last year, they didn't have a great season, but they lost to USC. And they still were respectable by the end of the year. And so I'm just curious to see if they lose that opener, do they respond by, okay, 2 weeks we have Florida and we're going to show who we really are? Or are they so like, man, we lost again, and then they just kind of have some disappointing losses down the road? So I really do think that Clemson, depending on how they react, win or loss, like, and if they win, are they like riding too high on themselves and then they go in way too confident against a Florida team that's feisty, right? And has a really good, really talented quarterback at least. And we'll see, how he does as a full year as the starter. So I do think though that LSU will win this game, not a blowout or anything like that, but I think they'll win convincingly. Only reason I say that is it's at home. And I do think that they have a bitter taste from losing that game last year, which with all due respect, I don't think they had any business losing to Florida last year. Florida played really well in that game, but there was just no reason LSU should lose that game. And it was at Florida, so that's still a hard game. But I think that they look at a game like that of like, what could have been. They have a couple games last year of what could have been, and I think that's one of them. So I think with Nussmeier in his last year, I just don't think he's going to let them like underestimate anybody this year, especially after like last year they really had no business losing to USC. Like that USC team was trash.
Yeah.
They were so bad. And I think that LSU's defense is so significantly better this year that they're not going to be losing games that they should win. I don't see it happening. And I think again, if this is at Florida, I think maybe, I could see that happening. And look, it's Florida, right? So it's not like it's not like USF or something, like they're a very good program with a lot of talent. And so Florida could certainly win that game. But I think because it's at night in Death Valley, Nussmeier's last year, the defense, I think is going to be a lot better. And if Lagway does have a weakness, it's, throwing the interception. And he didn't really have to worry about that against LSU's defense last year because they were so bad.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious to see if they're able to maybe trick him into some throws or get some pressure off the edge. Because I know he's not as mobile, I think, as some people think he is. He's definitely more of a pocket passer.
Oh no. He's not. Like, he stopped being mobile really after the Georgia game last year. And it really feels like with this LSU team, I get a strange feeling similarly to how I felt in 2018 going into 2019. Because a lot of people don't know, right? But 2018, when Joe Burrow was first year at Florida, he lost the game. He lost to UF, right?
Yeah, and he threw a pick six to lose.
Threw a pick six to lose. But that was in Gainesville, right? Like and all of those things. And so a lot of the Gator fans were like, oh, we know Joe Burrow. We know Justin Jefferson. We know Jamar Chase. We know how to beat those guys. We've did it before, right? But we seriously underestimated that squad coming into 2019. And it kind of gives me a similar vibe with Nuss and this squad here of just like you don't know how good they are. They're good, but you don't really get a sense of how good they are. So I think in my heart of hearts, I'm like, I want to see Florida win this for revenge of Kyle Trask in that squad in 2019. Right, for throwing that pick at the end. I'm just like, I'm still like feeling that. And I'm like, you know what? I think they can. And I think also part of that is taking the pressure off Lagway to not have to throw.
Yeah.
I think much of Florida's season, people will say Florida's season hinges on Lagway's health.
Yeah.
And I think aspects of that are true, but I also think I'm like, we have a deep running back room and the best line, in my opinion, in the conference.
Yep.
Just run the ball. Like just grind it out, kind of do old school like Bama style offense and just like see where that takes us.
Yeah.
So I think it's cool that this game is the SEC opener for both teams.
Yeah.
Like, because we'll see just like this could also be a potential playoff matchup, right?
Yeah,
Like if
yeah.
both teams are as good as we think they are, we could see this being another first round matchup. And so, yeah. I'm like, why does this game gotta be so early? But at the same time, I'm like, let's go. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah. I do think the one reason I would say I'm, as an LSU fan, I'm glad to have this game early is you do get Lagway early before he maybe starts to make some of those adjustments and becomes like a legit, top 3, top 5 quarterback in the country type of thing. So, but yeah, I do think the way that you are talking about, LSU from 2018 to 2019, I don't feel that way yet. I feel that way about the defense, actually. Like the way because like Joe Burrow in the offseason, and I was actually at that game in 2018 when he threw that pick 6 to lose like in Gainesville. Me and Tim Ewing went to the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so, during that offseason going into 2019, people were asking Burrow like about the offense, and he was like, yeah, we're going to average like 40 points a game. And people were like, what? Get out of here. But that's how I feel about LSU's defense. I actually, like, I don't think they'll be as good as LSU's offense in 2019, but I think Harold Perkins is going to have a monster year. I think quarterbacks that aren't mobile are going to, I just think he's going to wreak havoc, because so his freshman year, I remember when they played against Alabama and upset Alabama in overtime, Bryce Young was the quarterback in that game, and Harold Perkins was spying him almost the whole game. And there was 1 or 2 plays where you're like, Bryce Young's going to get the edge and take up off the sideline. And he, without an angle, just hunted him down. And just like, it was just crazy. And so I think you're going to see that out of Harold Perkins, like guys that are just not prepared for the speed that he actually has from sideline to sideline. I think, and then you got Whit Weeks coming up the middle. I think there's going to be times where they send both those guys and it's just going to be trouble. So we'll see. But I do think that could be a really close game, but I think LSU is going to take that game personally because of how it went last year. And I could see them kind of unleashing Harold Perkins on, on DJ Lagway. With him being a young quarterback, I think what they're going to say is Florida does have a good line, so I know they're going to try to run the ball, but I think they're going to try to speed Lagway up when they, when he's in those passing situations. So, but I'm sure he's also improved, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, so we'll start to speed through these. We're at 50 minutes. Holy cow. Okay, so.
Oh, man, there's a lot of games, man.
Yeah, I know.
Got plenty.
Yeah. Okay, so week 3, UF LSU. So the next one that I have is in week 5. There's 2 games in week 5. I have Oregon at Penn State, and I have Bama at Georgia. Mm-hmm. What are you thinking about those games?
I don't really know much about this. Shows obviously my bias around like towards SEC and not towards Big Ten. I mean, I know a little bit more about Oregon living out here in Washington. Like, got Dante Moore, you got some pretty good receivers. In Deporia Moore, like young receivers, Evan Stewart, too. So Oregon, I think I like Oregon. Penn State, though, has been getting so much press about just like, this is James Franklin's best team, which is crazy to think about because, he's coached Micah Parsons, coached Saquon Barkley, right? So for him to be like, this is his best team and they're the number 2 team in the country, that is saying something to me. And I think what's nice about this game, it's a rematch of the Big Ten championship. Mm-hmm. This will also give us an idea of, can James Franklin win big games, like against teams that are his equal or better.
Right.
We haven't seen him really do that, like, honestly, since Saquon Barkley. Like, he hasn't really been able to be competitive against like squads that like Ohio State or an Oregon or, so I don't expect that to change, honestly. Like, I like Dan Lanning. I like his style of coaching. I like his defensive mind. I like Oregon to win this game.
Okay, it's cool. I won't spend a lot of time on this. I think Penn State's overrated. I do think that they could win this game just because it's at home, but I think Drew Aller is overrated. Like, I think he's a good quarterback, but people are just talking about him like I'm surprised Penn State's ranked 2, if I'm being honest. Like, I just don't see it, I think it was in their playoff game, the whole second half, they didn't complete a pass to a wide receiver. Like, they had 1 completion to a tight end, and then they ran the ball the rest of the time. Like, to not show confidence in your quarterback, I don't understand how people could think he's a top tier quarterback in the country. Yeah. So I think Penn State could win this game because it's at home and their defense is really good, but I have no confidence in saying that. And really the only reason I'm leaning Penn State is, if I'm not mistaken, I think Evan Stewart is hurt and he's like out for the year, or at least for much of it.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
Yeah, he had a big injury, and so I know Decorian Moore, who was committed to LSU for like a year, and then he decommitted like last minute and went to Oregon. But he's a freshman, so we'll see. So yeah, so I don't have any strong feelings towards that game, but I think Penn State could have an edge just because it's at home, and that's a long trip for Oregon to make. Then the other game, Week 5, Bama at Georgia. What do you think about this one?
As much as I hate the Dogs, I think they got this one. I think there's something about Bama having to go into Athens. I think Ty Simpson, excuse me. I think he's the problem.
Yeah. Yep.
Putting it lightly, I think him having to go into Athens to try to beat the Dogs, I just don't see that working. Like he has weapons around him, but I think that road environment is just going to be very difficult. And Kirby Smart, again, as much as I hate the Dogs, I love his style of coaching. I love his defense. Like, so just give me Georgia to beat them. And I think Bama will put up a fight, but I think that they will force Simpson to make a couple of errors, that defense.
So I'm with you. I think this will actually be a close game, but I do have Georgia. I think that so earlier on in Nick Saban's career at Alabama, often he had unbelievable defenses, unbelievable running backs, and very average quarterbacks, right? Like the McElroys, those type of guys.
Yeah.
And that's exactly,
all those guys.
exactly.
Yeah,
but then they were just elite everywhere else: offensive line, running back, defense, like all around the board. So they just didn't need like a Tua, but then later on they were getting like a Tua, or a Bryce Young, guys that were getting drafted high. So that's kind of what I see with Ty Simpson, and I just without Nick Saban, I don't see them being able to. Now, I think their defense is really good, but I don't see them being able to have the format that they did against when they, with Nick Saban, when they had below, I don't want to say below average, but not an elite QB. And I think Georgia's going to be able to exploit that. Now, I do think, Georgia's kind of in a similar boat, right? Like Stockton is no, world beater or anything. But I think with that defense at home, and going against a QB that's suspect, I think they'll win that game. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, like, even just to further add, like, I think, like you said, like, Stockton, I'm not putting so much pressure on him in a way that's different from how I feel about, like, Arch and Julian Sand. Like, I feel like,
right.
The way Bama beat Georgia last year, Jalen Milroe scored, like, 4 of their touchdowns. Yep. And I think 2 or 3 of them were on the ground. You know what I mean? Like, so. And that's where Jalen Milroe hurt them. That's not Simpson's strong suit, if I'm not mistaken. Like, his running is not his strong suit. So the fact that he's going to be much more limited in Georgia's defense is just going to feast on that. And I think, yeah, give me the Dogs for this one.
Yep, I agree with you. Okay, then the next week, Week 6, Texas at Florida. I'm actually excited about this game.
Man, if I was still in Gainesville, because my dad has season tickets. If I was still in Gainesville, I would try to convince him to go to that game, like take me to that game. Because usually he works. Like, he works, right. And my mom is the one that ends up taking the tickets with one of her friends. But I'd be like, man, if I was in Gainesville, Pop and I'd be going to that. Man, this is going to be a crazy game, right? Because Texas, I'm betting at this point, will be undefeated. Florida will could have one or 2 losses at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think in my heart of hearts, I would love for them to be undefeated. Because then I know for sure that College Game Day would be at this game. I think that this is a game where it can go one of 2 ways. Texas comes in and just dominates, or Florida really comes out and just like puts up a really big fight.
Mm-hmm.
And because this game is at Week 6, we'll get a good sense of who Florida is. Like, yeah. I think it's not like Miami last year where there's so much unknown and then Miami just comes in and just dominates. I think we'll kind of get a sense, can Texas really can they go into Ohio Stadium and beat Ohio State and then go into the swamp and beat the Gators? Like, I think they'll be tested in terms of environments, and I'm not banking on Arch Manning being able to do that to every place that he goes to go into a hostile environment.
Yeah.
I think I could see. I've heard so many takes on this game. This is the game where I'm saying home field advantage has to matter the most, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just to kind of like make a statement win, and I'm gonna take the Gators to win by a touchdown. I'm gonna say win by a touchdown, just to kind of like as a way of shocking the world, because I think that this is a game where like oh, like this is not just like a field goal kind of game. Like the Gators like actually did some controlling and protected the ball and kept the ball away from Arch Manning successfully.
Yeah. So, okay, for this game, I feel like this is somewhat of a cop out, but I was just looking up both teams' schedules, and I know that this is game 3 of that crazy 4-game stretch for Florida that you're talking about, where they play at LSU, at Florida against, or no, I'm sorry, in Miami, and then home versus Texas. So that's a tough stretch. And I think that it could depend on the games before, right? Like if they, beat LSU, beat Miami, I think, they could come in on a high and we're looking at that game completely different, right? But if they lose to LSU and then beat Miami, do they feel like that's kind of like a consolation prize, whatever, whatever? And so they could also be beat up. Like, I don't really know Miami's team well enough to know if they're like a really physical team, but those LSU Florida games are physical as could be,
Yeah, they are.
So it
Yes,
could
they
depend
are.
on health. I think it helps them a ton that it's at home. I think it will be closer than what most people would. I think most people about this game are going to say Texas is probably going to beat Florida handedly. I don't think that. I think Florida will, be able to control the clock a little bit with their offensive line, with their run game at home to be able to keep it close. I think like if I had a gun to my head and I had to choose, I think right now I would pick Texas just because of the talent. But I don't feel confident in that pick. Like I wouldn't be surprised at all if Florida won this game. And looking at Texas's schedule, do they come in either fresh because they obviously have that huge game against Ohio State week 1, but then they have San Jose State, they have UTEP and Sam Houston. So there's like 3 practice games where they're going to win those games easily, but that mean that they're not ready for that big time game, or does it mean they come in fresh and maybe Florida's a little beat up after playing LSU and Miami, and back-to-back games on the road for both those games too. So that's the one reason why I could see maybe Florida. And I don't think there's a bye week prior.
There's a bye, which I'm grateful for.
Okay,
For
so they
that
do have
reason.
a bye. Okay, well, that gives me a little bit more confidence in Florida, to be honest. Like, I think this game could be a coin flip game because it's at Florida. Again, if I had to pick, I think I would choose Texas in a close game. But with it being at home and with having that bye, I do think that favors Florida more than it does Texas because of the games they play prior to
Yeah.
that. So
It reminds me of a couple years ago when Bryce Young won the Heisman at Bama. Bama came to Florida, and it was, I think, like the second or third game of the season, sold out game in the Swamp, and Bama took like a 3-touchdown lead at first. Florida still ended up losing that game, but Florida came back, and the reason they lost was because of a failed 2-point conversion that they couldn't send it into overtime. Like the final score was 31-29. Um, and I could see that happening. I personally am not one of that because those suck. Those are
yeah,
heartbreakers.
yeah,
Like you're just kind of
yeah,
like, I want those upsets. Like, and so I'm rooting in the way of like Florida pull off this upset. Like I know you're capable of doing it. Again, like control the clock, control the ball, play sound defense. Like you're capable. You're
yeah.
capable of winning this game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're certainly capable. I think, like, if you had asked people, knowing, hey, this isn't last year when they played Texas, where it's like no one really gave them a shot at all.
Yeah.
So I think it will be close, especially because it's at Florida. But that would be a fun one. And like we were saying before we hopped on, is that I had kind of forgot that they had already played last year. But before last year, they hadn't played each other in our lifetimes. So that's why this game kind of stuck out to me, where I was like, man, like Florida and Texas, like you just don't really think about those 2 teams on the same field together. So I think that one's going to be very interesting. I'm looking forward to that game. So, okay. So,
It almost feels like it could be a birth of like a new rivalry, honestly.
yeah, yeah,
Just because
yep.
they're just 2 big brands. They always compete in high school stuff, right? Like who's like it's usually them, Texas or California competing for like high school stuff, right? And so like I love the idea of playing Texas and playing them even just on a more consistent basis. But
Yeah, yep,
we'll see how this goes. Maybe I'll change my tune if they come in and destroy my
yeah.
game.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of the feel that some LSU fans have with like Oklahoma is like, will that kind of become a budding rivalry? Like they played in the playoff, like when Joe Burrow, in the first round of the playoff, they played
Mhm.
Jalen Hurts in Oklahoma.
Or even
and
the
whatnot.
'03 championship with Jason White and all of those guys.
Exactly.
Yep, yep.
Exactly. Yep. And some people feel that way about Texas too, just because we're competing with them a lot for recruits, just because LSU does dip into Texas a lot. Like it's pretty much Louisiana and Texas is where they get their players from. But Florida, Texas could be a fun rivalry. Those are very like two fan bases that are maybe some of the biggest fan bases in the country for sure between those two schools. So okay, so that was week 6. So I got one game in week 7. We don't have to spend a ton of time on these because I definitely want to get to that 9-game schedule. But honestly, I'm cool if this one runs a little longer. People that watch this episode are going to be college football fans, so they're going to be in it to watch this. So if we go a little long, that's cool. So I have LSU versus South Carolina. So that's at LSU. Somewhat of a revenge game for South Carolina, and it's become. I actually don't I have nothing against South Carolina. I actually started to really like South Carolina. So a number of years ago, LSU played. I think the game was supposed to be at LSU, and they ended up moving it to South Carolina because of a hurricane that had come through. Or flooding, like something. Or no, there was something in South Carolina that happened, like flooding or something like that. And South Carolina was very, I don't know the right word, just very like supportive, and like I had gained a lot of respect for South Carolina with the way that they handled that. And now I don't know why I'm blanking so much. I can't remember if something either happened in Baton Rouge or in South Carolina, but I think it was South Carolina because I remember Leonard Fournette after the game like signed his jersey and it went up for auction and all the money got donated to whatever was going on. Anyways, it just felt like there was some camaraderie that went around those two schools during that time period. And so I don't have anything against South Carolina, but I do think that a lot of LSU fans have become a bit annoyed with how much South Carolina has complained about the game last year with that one call.
Last year.
Yeah. So, and to a degree, I don't blame them because if they win that game, they make the playoff.
Same thing. If that happened to me, if that happened to the Gators, I'd be doing the same thing.
Especially with how things ended at the end of the year where they didn't get in the playoff because they were 9-3. Even though they went on that crazy run, they beat Clemson, and basically what happened was, so LSU was down 17 at half in that game, and Lenore Sellers. So something that LSU which I think will change a lot this year. Last year they could not stop running quarterbacks. They just couldn't. And he had he had like a 76-yard touchdown run. Like he was running all over LSU, and then he got hurt.
Yeah.
And so he didn't play in the second half, and it was Ashburn, the guy who came from Auburn, played the second half. And LSU came back and won. But LSU was down in the red zone, and Garrett Nussmeier threw an interception, and they ran it back for a touchdown. And it got called back because of a blindside block on Nussmeier, like a big hit on Nussmeier, and it got called back. And so that touchdown got taken off the board, and there's a big chance they win that game if that touchdown doesn't come off. So that's the main thing that South Carolina fans. So because of that, though, that they have talked about that ad nauseum, like during the offseason. So I honestly think LSU fans are so tired. I think LSU is tired of it. And so I actually think LSU wins this game pretty handily, like at home.
Yeah.
Because I think, and South Carolina lost a lot on their defense because they had a really good defense last year, and they lost a lot of players off that defense. So I think LSU wins this one handily, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lenore Sellers is Jalen Milroe just repackaged, honestly.
Yep.
Which is good, like in terms of like mobility, right? But you could also make mistakes in the pass game. Like Jalen Milroe could run the ball for 100 yards on you, but he could also throw 3 interceptions.
Yeah.
So it's just something you got to be like. It just comes with the territory. I do love Shane Beamer. My favorite, Emily and I's favorite Shane Beamer quote was when he was playing Florida in 2021. South Carolina was not expected to beat Florida. They this is the game that got Dan Mullen, I would think, fired.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's either this one or the Missouri game. But in this game, the South Carolina game, this man is Shane Beamer is halftime and South Carolina's up like 24-7.
Mm-hmm.
Shane Beamer goes to the camera and they're like, "Hey, how are you feeling about your team?" And he says, "It's nice to do these things while we're winning. It's been a while."
Yeah.
Like he expected to be getting demolished by Florida, but from that moment on, I was like, Shane Beamer is dope. And that man is funny.
I like Shane Beamer too. Have you watched the SEC documentary on Netflix? Yeah,
I did,
I liked
man.
him a lot after that too.
Yeah, I like him a lot as a coach. Like I was like, man, if Billy Napier get fired, let's reach out to him. Like, honestly. But yeah, give me LSU. It's at LSU. I don't think South Carolina can win in that environment.
I agree.
Yeah, just give me LSU to just like to take over this game.
Okay, so we have a couple more.
You know what's crazy? Week 7 has some interesting games too. Like we ain't got to talk about them, but I know
list them off.
OU Texas
Red River
this week. Red River rivalry, right? Ohio State will play Illinois, and that's supposed to be a good one this year.
Yep.
Indiana is going to be playing Oregon. Florida's going to be playing A&M, and I think this one, I could see Florida dropping this one. I actually think Florida will drop this one. Because I think that's just going to, I think, again, that stretch of 4 games, they're going to, my goal for them, obviously, and as a fan, is to be 4-0, but that's a hard ask.
It's a tough stretch.
That's a hard ask, and I think
A&M. Is that game at A&M?
It's at A&M.
Man, so
it's coming off of that.
So they have LSU at Miami, then home to Texas, then at Texas, and that's brutal.
Yeah. So I just think that's the game where it's like I could see them dropping it, right? Like, and if they drop like LSU or Miami, then that's where it's that 2-2 comes in. But I think that this one, that's the one that's going to get them, just because it's hard unless they pull off like a Joe Burrow type stuff this year and just go through and work through all these, which I don't foresee happening. I just think that that's the one that's gonna get.
Yeah. That is a great week. Week 7. Was that week 7? Week 7.
Week 7.
That's a week right there. That's a week right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the sake of time, let me just ramble off. There's about 5 or 6 games left that I have here, and you just kind of pick out ones that stick out to you. And I'm going to leave one off because I want to close with this one just to lead into the next conversation about the 9-game SEC schedule. So week 10, you have Penn State at Ohio State and Georgia at Florida. Week 11, you have LSU at Bama. And then week 12, you have Texas at Georgia. So those are the last ones I have on there. And then one that I'm saving for the next conversation.
I think the one that I feel most like determined about, like, or just like the nation will obviously be watching, is that Texas versus Georgia.
Yeah.
That is going to have so many eyes. And you talk about another potential national championship or semifinal matchup.
Yeah,
that could easily, like, that could also, that's a rematch of last year's SEC title game. It could be potentially the SEC title game this year. So that game is going to be, we'll probably be sick of seeing Texas, Georgia, but they're just really those top teams right now in the conference. I think because it's in Athens, there's something about that. Like, Texas lost to Georgia twice last year. And for them to have to go on the road to play them, you know what? I'm gonna change my mind. I'm gonna give me Texas to actually pull off an upset here. Yeah, pull off an upset here.
And who knows if it'll even be an upset at that point? You know, we just don't know. Yeah,
because it might just be like a flat out. It might just be a flat out like sure thing at this point. Give me Texas for this one. Just because Manning, like, the whole squad will just have, like, it's week 12. We'll know what these teams look like.
Yeah.
Manning that whole team will be severely tested, but they're also expected to be better than everybody they played.
Yeah.
So at this point in the season, where the teams that I think will make more mistakes is Georgia. Like, I could see Georgia falling to Florida in week 10. You know what I mean? Like, so I think Texas will come in and actually really, like, and my hope of hopes is to stomp on Kirby Smart's dreams here.
Man, that might be the game of all games that's like a playoff implication, at least in the SEC. I haven't looked at all the schedules for the Big Ten, but that's week 12, that game. So I think that's the second to the last week, or I guess third to last week. There's 2 more games after that for Georgia. But man, so I'm looking at Georgia's schedule. What a year to have season tickets if you're a Georgia fan. You get Alabama at home, you get Ole Miss at home, and you get Texas at home. That's crazy. And then you also, I mean, I know it's not like that big of a thing, but Kentucky too. So, man, what a fun year for Georgia fans if you have season tickets.
I mean, if you got season tickets, I feel like if you got season tickets to Georgia, Florida, like Texas, like you you're gonna have some fun, right? Like you're gonna have some
Mm-hmm.
fun just going to these games. It makes me wonder how expensive these tickets are. Like part of me wants to tell my dad, like, Pops, if you're not going to Texas at
Sell it.
Florida, you should try to see how much you can get for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
you should try to see how much you can get for it. Just because, like, that's gonna be an expensive ticket.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. Okay, so to close out, we're gonna talk through the 9-game SEC schedule, what we think, and there's one game that I left off this list that I have written down that I want to bring up. That's actually not an SEC game, but it is one of the reasons that swayed my opinion on this 9-game SEC schedule. So basically, for those who don't know that are watching, if you're watching this far in, you probably know. But just to explain quickly, so for years and years and years, the SEC has played an 8-game SEC schedule. So basically, what that means is that every SEC school will play 8 games of their schedule against other SEC opponents. And so now they're going to be adding another SEC opponent and taking away an out of conference game. So that's basically the gist of it. So it's basically adding one harder game than you would have otherwise. So with that being said, Jordan, how are you feeling about the 9-game SEC schedule? And just so we know, the other conferences, well, the Big Ten already plays a 9-game schedule, but the big debate is that the lower end of the Big Ten is much worse than the lower end of the SEC is kind of the debate. So how are you feeling about it?
Yeah. I feel like nine games is not much different from 8 games, to be completely honest.
Sure.
Especially with 9 games in the Big Ten. But also at the same time, I think what I'm discouraged by with I don't like it. And my reasons for a 9-game schedule is more around the lines of you just make it harder for the schools like Florida or like a Georgia or Texas, like all of them to really push through. If we're being honest, I think if you the more conference games you have, the more you discourage cross conference playing. I know they have that clause around like you have to play a team from one of the Power 4 conferences, but Florida already does that. Florida State is their permanent opponent, right? Like Florida already has that. So the likelihood of Florida playing a Clemson or Florida playing, Ohio State even just got a little bit smaller. I actually like those types of games when Florida can play out of conference or play like a former Big 12 or Pac-12 team. Like when Florida played Utah, I love that they split that series. I love that they got to play that. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But a 9-game conference almost ensures that won't happen, just because why schedule those extra hard games when I already got to play an extra game against the hardest conference, right? Within the harder conference. So I think it's more frustrating for me as a fan. Just like, man, I was, there was a strange thing that I was hoping for where, man, wouldn't it be great if Florida got a home series with Washington, and got to come to Seattle? I would love to go watch that game, like that would be so dope. But that's just, I think that's going to be far and few between happening for now, just because it definitely affects my team, but I can also see how that would affect other teams if they wanted to explore playing other games or playing other out of conference games.
Yeah. Yep. No, I totally understand what you're saying. And I actually hadn't really thought about it like that because so LSU doesn't have a permanent out of conference like Florida has with Florida State, but LSU always schedules just look at the last 5 years. They had Florida State home and home. Then they had USC, Southern Cal. And then they play Clemson in Clemson this year, but then next year we start the season with Clemson in Baton Rouge. And to be honest, that 9-game SC schedule starts next year, and LSU already has Clemson on the schedule. So it's like they play a 9-game SEC schedule and then also play Clemson. And like you said, I think they're less likely to play teams like Florida State, Clemson, USC if they're adding, on Missouri or Kentucky or South Carolina or
Yeah. Some people are like Big Ten fans and stuff are like, I'm not really like an SEC like I love the SEC kind of stuff. Like I'm like I couldn't care less, right? Like, but it's just I think what I'm struggling with is like you've actually incentivized the SEC schools to schedule like Austin P or schedule UL Monroe or you've actually incentivized them to do those because if I know I got to play 10 games against Power 4 opponents, 9 of those within my own conference, I'm not I'm not going out of my way to try to schedule another Power 4 or Group of 5 school. Like, I'm not doing that. Like, that doesn't make any. I need my team to be healthy. That's why I love that Florida. I love that Florida's opening up with LIU and South Florida, because those are great tune-up games before we get into the heart of this schedule.
Right.
So I'm just like, we already are playing essentially that 9. I know it's not technically the 9-game schedule, but it kind of is. Like, we're playing 8 SEC games and 2 Power 4 teams. You know, like that's Florida's schedule this year. So in my mind, I'm like, let's just keep it to 8, honestly.
Yeah.
Because then we could open it up for either you can schedule another Power 4, or you could, if you want to keep your team healthy, like, schedule against a team that is not as, like, a sorrier team, honestly.
Yeah. And I've come around to that position. So when I first heard, I was like, yeah, like, bring on the, and I know, for instance, like, I listen to Jacob Hester and Matt Flynn have a radio show together every day called Off the Bench. And, they're, as former players, the competitiveness in them, they're like, let every game be a SEC game. Like, I want to play all the hard opponents, and that's like the competitor in them. But I'm starting to come around to, like, not enjoying this. And so shout out to 2 guys that I listen to that are LSU guys. So Rafino and then Carter, the Bryant Power, they, they're on each other's shows, and they were debating this 8-game, and Carter is like, all about the 9-game SEC schedule. Like, bring it on. Like, if you're not good enough to get through that, then you're not good enough to win the national championship anyways, type of thing, which I could see. And then Rafino is just kind of like, what we're talking about, where, man, you're adding on an extra game. And the argument that, and I'm going to give him credit for, is that he was talking about. Sorry, hold on. I'm hearing myself through. Can you mute real quick?
Yeah.
Because I think I'm coming through. Yeah, I think I'm coming through. I'm coming through your computer for some reason. But anyways, I want to give him credit. And this is why I held this game off, is one of the games that I'm going to be watching closely. Because I'm just going to be watching Indiana closely this year in general. But Indiana last year was 10-2. They made the playoff. But I didn't realize this until I was watching this show where they're kind of debating back and forth about this 9-game SEC schedule, is Indiana didn't beat, but played 2 teams all year that were above 500 last season, which is insane. And I thought I heard it wrong. I had to look it up. I was like, no, he must mean that they beat 2 teams that were above 500. They played 2 games all year against teams that, and they already play a 9-game Big Ten schedule. And so they played Michigan and they played, I believe, Ohio State last year. And they beat Michigan and they lost to Ohio State. And those are the only 2 teams they played all year that had above 500 records, which is crazy. So that, to me, all of a sudden changed that. I'm like, man, I'm not about this 9-game SEC conference when they're, that's what Big Ten claims, right? Is, well, we play a 9-game, but you have teams, and there's not. Another stat that he gave was there was, I believe, 6 teams in the Big Ten, 5 or 6 teams in the Big Ten that went 6-week stretches without playing a ranked opponent. 5 or 6 different teams. SEC didn't have one such team that went 6 weeks without playing a ranked opponent. So I think that just shows right there that it's like, from top to bottom, it's not even when you talk about 9-game conference schedule.
So I was even to that point. I think someone I saw, I'm blanking on the person. It was another sports writer, but they had showed how, like, Indiana, the Big Ten had, like, when we think about, like, the SEC, Vanderbilt is usually the brunt of the joke, right? Like, they are the team that has the lowest wins. Team schedule is like the easiest team you could beat in the SEC, right? And that obviously is starting to turn a little bit with what they did last year. But we only have, like, one school in the SEC that is at the caliber of Vanderbilt, and that's Vanderbilt, right? But the Big Ten has, like, 6. Right? Like, you think about Northwestern, you think about Indiana, you think about Illinois, Purdue, right? Like, all of those teams are at Vandy's level or worse. So to kind of, like, get that idea that we need to play 9 games in this conference because that's tougher, it's like, not really. Like, honestly, like, you could make the argument that we should play 6 conference games in this conference, and it would probably still be tougher than a 9-game Big Ten schedule, right? Like, and that gets into the whole debate of, like, well, SEC is top heavy, and it's like, well, this year it's looking like it's going to be the most round outs that it's been in a while. Just because of how many teams recruit well and also have the money to be able to bring in top players. Whereas the Big Ten, you already know that's going to one of 3 teams, 4 teams now, but Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon. Like, it's really one of those 4 teams that are going to like walk away with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
And,
I think that sorry, can you mute again? Sorry, I'm just hearing an echo of everything I'm saying is echoing back in. I don't know what's doing that, but yeah. So, and we'll probably talk about this. I think maybe Jordan and I will decide. We'll close out here. We're about an hour and a half now. So, but Jordan and I will hop on periodically. I would like to do this throughout the college football season and maybe talk through some of these big games after they happen, maybe right before they happen, right after they happen. So, him and I are going to be discussing some new things we want to do with the podcast. Where when we do these kind of pointed episodes where they're about something specific, we might bring them out on Fridays, especially about college football, so they come out right before the week starts. Or maybe we'll do some Sunday night things where we talk about after the games and we kind of break down what we thought, what we were surprised about, some things like that. So stay tuned and just keep an eye out for these different episodes. We're going to keep doing the episodes that come out every Monday morning. And we're going to be talking through some new topics. If you haven't watched through When Church Hurts, check that out. But thank you for joining us with this college football preview. And shout out to Stu Gotts if he ever listens to this, which he never will. But just like that, college football is back. And so thank you again. Enjoy the season. Enjoy this weekend. When you're watching this, the games will start tomorrow. So have a fun day tomorrow as you sit and rot on your couch as you watch college football. So we love you guys. Tune in Monday as we're going to have some more sports episodes coming out just about some fun times Jordan and I had as fans growing up. That's going to be coming out the next 2 Mondays. And so we love you guys. Thank you for joining us. And we will see you next week.
We out.
There it is.
All right.